Hello everyone, welcome back to Touch the Fire Twice. I'm Joshua, and I'm here today to do an in-depth sniff and comparison review of the 2025 launch of Bath & Body Works Almond Croissant Candle. But first, if you're new to Touch the Fire Twice, welcome. My mission here is to share my love and passion for fine home fragrance as an enthusiast, an educator, a reviewer, to inspire you to increase your own fragrance knowledge and understanding, ultimately enhancing the scent memories that you create. If you want to learn more about what I do, why I do it, and how I do it, you can check out my website at TouchTheFireTwice.com, and please do give me a follow over on Instagram, also at TouchTheFireTwice. But for now, let's dig into Almond Croissant, candle and literal almond croissant. So this fragrance is part of the Bath & Body Works White Barn early spring 2025 collection. I will say right from the jump that I did not and do not love this fragrance enough on cold to purchase the 3-wick, but there was a single wick candle sale for $6.95, and I figured that's worth it. Let's give it a shot. It was the 10 off sale in early January of 2025. This fragrance has been out in the past. I believe 2024 may have been the first year that it came out, though it could have also made an appearance a bit earlier than that. I'm not certain. I smelled it last year, didn't love it, and totally passed on it. But this year I wanted to dig into it, trying to explore things that aren't always my absolute favorite. And frankly, also, let's be honest, folks love gourmand candles. So you clicked on this when you may not click on some of my other reviews. And of course, we always want to bring more fragrance fans into the community. So this is the standard Bath & Body Works 8-ounce single wick candles. They did this redesign a few years back where it is just a straight cylindrical jar with the lid that matches their 3-wick candles, a bit thinner, but still that nice premium sort of heavy metal chrome, in this case actually slightly golden lid. These retail for $16.95, and they give a burn time of 20 to 35 hours. For this in-depth sniff and comparison review, I will get my nose on this. We'll talk through the notes here. I will compare it to literally an almond croissant that I purchased for the purposes of this review, as well as one other candle that I want to talk through that it's not anywhere close to it, but it is still a candle that has almond in it, and kind of want to talk through some of the differences in almonds, how they can come across in fine fragrance, fine home fragrance, and then also the close connection that most folks already have in their olfactory senses, but that is the connection between almond fragrance and taste and cherry fragrance and taste. So we'll dig into that a little bit as well on the science side of things. Notes on Almond Croissant are toasted almonds, vanilla glaze, and flaky croissant. I will say also that the burn quality, as most of us know, on these single wicks is not fantastic. This was lit for probably at least 2 hours, and though the wick was fairly centered, it never got an even pull here. It was leaning to the one side as far as just the burn direction. And so I did not put my foil on this that I do oftentimes for my luxury candles because I wanted to frankly test it out and see what would happen. I will say though that the throw is quite strong on this. So though the burn is not great, it did throw. That's still unacceptable. A candle that's only, 3 inches in diameter should have an even burn if there is the appropriate wick to wax ratio and size. That's a whole other discussion. Getting my nose on the actual fragrance. It is an obvious bakery gourmand. So gourmand can be non-edible or more true to life edible bakery gourmands. And this is more so in that true to life edible bakery gourmand. There's a heavy hit of a slightly candied almond, that nutty, sweet kind of marzipan. There is a buttery aspect to this. It doesn't go too deep into croissants, although let's be frank, a croissant in itself doesn't have that strong of a fragrance. It's more about the crunch, the flavor, the lamination of those layers and layers and layers of that flaky dough. But the flavor itself more comes from the butter and the natural toasted flavors that come from baking the croissant. I will say this does have a fairly authentic, let's call it kind of gourmand almond. Think marzipan. So marzipan is almond paste, where it is simply crushed almonds with sugar, and it becomes paste, almost like kind of a Play-Doh consistency paste. Don't think your things like cookie butters or Nutella that has some hazelnuts, but also lots of palm oil and sugar and cocoa, things like that. It really typically is just ground almonds and sugar, and that's going to be used as an ingredient in many baked goods, cakes, creams, custards, pies, muffins, anything you can imagine that has almond in it oftentimes will have some marzipan in it, and often used simply as the filling, which is also the case in the almond croissant that I have here today. But there's something about this, though it does smell like almond, there's no denying that, so accurate on the almond name, which is not a hard fragrance to duplicate synthetically. It's very common. Where it slightly misses the mark for me is it's hard to pinpoint, but there's something still artificial about this. I think it is the butter fragrance. I mean, they don't call butter out here. The flaky croissant clearly is gonna have loads of butter in it. That's how you make the layers for a croissant. But it kind of reminds me of, I did a Goose Creek review a few years back, and there was some sort of buttery baked good gourmand in there, and it just smelled fake to me. There's no other word that I can say, like synthetics. Now, most home fragrances, unless you're buying really high quality, natural, essential oil based fragrances, if they have fragrance oils versus essential oils, they're typically going to be synthetic, and that's fine. There's so many fragrances out there that we can't even get other than artificially synthetic, and that's fine. But they can smell incredibly authentic. The baked aspect, the croissant aspect, just leans a little bit, I don't know, it's like they need to play with the levels of it for me, tone down the butter, bring up a little bit of the flaky toastiness. You think back to Bath & Body Works' French baguette candle, which, though a baguette is a completely different process versus your laminated dough for a croissant, they nailed that to the T, where it smells like you're opening a jar of just like sliced baguettes in the jar. To me, that's an example of a really authentic baked good and actual, in that case, bread. This just, I'm being picky here, but why not? It just does not have that same authenticity. But again, a croissant itself doesn't necessarily have a strong, obvious scent. Flavor, yes. Texture, absolutely. But there's a reason why many croissants, though the French will have my head for this, but typically it's filled with something. Either it has some chocolate, or you put butter on it, or you add ham to it, or whatever it may be. It is oftentimes a vehicle for other flavors to pair with the beautiful, flaky, crusty, crispy, laminated aspect of the croissant. So for me, there's just something that I don't love about this. I'm glad I only have it in the single wick. I will continue to burn it. As I said, it is a powerhouse, very strong. For a single wick, that is impressive, even though the burn quality is not great. There must be a heavy load of fragrance oils in here, but this is not, as someone who loves almond scented anything and almond based foods, I should love this, and I don't. Now, before I compare it to the other candle and my actual almond croissant here, I want to talk about that specific scent versus just the toasted almond, but really that kind of almond extract that you get in here. There is quite a crossover similarity between almond scents and flavors and cherry scents and flavors, to the point where they can almost be interchangeable when you smell them, depending, frankly, what the marketing tells us or what other ingredients are paired with the cherry or the almond. And that is because one of the primary organic compounds within both cherries and bitter almonds is benzaldehyde, which brings that fruity, nutty, sweet aspect both to almonds and to cherries. So that is why we get that crossover, especially when it comes to things like almond extract and cherry flavorings in things across the board. Now, comparing this to an actual almond croissant here, as you can see, this has a bit of powdered sugar on top, some of that sort of marzipan paste drizzled over before it was baked, and some actual toasted almonds, and that marzipan is actually inside here. It simply looks like, sort of think of it as wet sand or sort of a grainy Play-Doh. That is the consistency of it, and it is simply sugar with almond meal, ground almonds, similar to an almond flour mixed with sugar. Quite delicious. When it comes to the fragrance, there's a bit more of a toasted, kind of not quite burnt sugar, but caramelized for the amount of sugars that are in butter and flour. Just that slightly burnt aspect or toasted aspect that is missing from this candle. There's toasted almonds, but the authentic side of a croissant is going to have not just the flaky butteriness, but also sort of the burnt crispy edges and top. So they're halfway there, but it really does not match a flaky, crispy, wonderful almond croissant for me. Comparing it to one other candle that is not meant to be even a true foodie, though still a gourmand, would be an old Homeworks classic, at least in my mind, Almond Flower. This is one of my favorite Homeworks fragrances. Now, as you know, I stopped purchasing from Homeworks about 2+ years ago at this point, because their quality, their marketing, their everything really has gone terribly down the drain. And though there might be some hits, I'm not willing to pay my money for something that is potentially going to be a big fat flop, and when there's some deception in, I think, some of the marketing and the claims that are made about their candles. But the ones I have, some of them are great, including Almond Flower. Notes on this one: almond blossom, creamy pistachio, orange flower, and vanilla bean. Now, this one to me, this is a nice burn, good 4-wick. This is from 2018. Let's call it the golden era of Homeworks candles. And this does have an almond scent to it. It's not quite that almond extract This you would not confuse, frankly, with cherry. It does not have that benzaldehyde. It's more so, as they say, the almond blossoms. You're going to get a nuttiness from creamy pistachio, maybe ground pistachios, and then the almond tree flower, which is going to give you a lighter, more floral almond fragrance versus either the nutty or the cherry-like intensity of an almond extract. Orange flower, not so much orange in here. Vanilla bean, sure, almost leaning towards a tonka. Again, gourmand, but not edible. This almost feels like it has some, I don't know, kind of shea, something very warm and comforting. This could have been called a cozy blanket, but it doesn't lean quite as oppressive, I think, as some blanket scents can be. And this almost reminds me a bit of, for some OG Bath & Body Works fragrances, what was it, rice flower and shea? That sort of comforting, not quite spa-like, not quite aromatherapy, not spicy, almost creamy, soft, but still a nuttiness. Not a toasted aspect, but a bit of a nuttiness to it, certainly from the pistachio, and that almond flower brings you that as well. This is beautiful. Doesn't really smell much at all like this, but it was an almond candle I had on hand. And granted, you know, there is still a bit of crossover where they're both clearly almonds, just very different interpretations and executions on almond. So that is my in-depth sniff and comparison review on Almond Croissant. I'd love to hear your takes on this, your thoughts on this. I will have some other reviews coming up for new scents from Bath & Body Works this season, including Self-Care Sunday, White Iris and Cedarwood, Pistachio Milk and Honey, and speaking of cherries, Sweet Heart Cherry, which is actually burning now. That might be coming up soon. So let me know what you think, and until next time, take care.